So obviously this is not an exhaustive conversation. We're not going to figure out all of the different things that we need to do at any given time throughout this, and things are constantly evolving. But this is a conversation to have just for camera department and sound, to talk a little bit about remote monitoring, but also process and what we can do to take care of each other. This is an opportunity that we have collectively as a group to really look out for our community, and also kind of take a good step forward in terms of putting ourselves out there that we are ready to, embrace this. Our crews have always, punched above their weight, and we are a really good environment to do production. And this is another opportunity for us to kind of not win, but be successful at transforming this limitation into something that's an advantage for us based on the space that we have and the commitment that we have as a community. A lot of the conversations that I've had are simultaneously about being on set, but then also being offset, so that just talking about lifestyle choices as we go through, and responsibilities for everyone, when we go out to work, that we're all safe. I think that from a DP perspective, there's going to be there's often education going on with the client. There's often conversations that are happening about limitations or possibilities or other things that can kind of happen within a project. And I think that safety is just going to be another portion of that. And I mean, this is partially just a group conversation. So I don't know if anybody has anything that's pressing or thoughtful or concerning. I mean, hopefully most of you have either looked at 600 guidelines or the way forward guidelines, or looked at any of the other things. There's restaurant guidelines that are actually kind of interesting to read. There's a couple different things. A lot of this has to do with food safety is, one way to look at some of these things. There are protocols that are already in place to keep people safe and free from bacteria and viruses and all sorts of other things. So, I think that that's a good place to start. And I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything at the moment. Looks like maybe we have Tom. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome.
Thanks.
I just, Tom, just so you know, I just told everyone what the solution was. So you're going to have to watch the recording.
Oh, no worries.
You missed it.
No worries.
But I don't know, does anyone else want to sort of throw anything out for the moment, since I just talked for 5 minutes?
Caprice, this is our second departmental meeting. You were, moderator over the art department, and you want to just give us a brief recap of the kinds of things that you guys discussed through that meeting?
Yeah. So thank you guys for, I'm here as a location manager to support you and help you and come up with solutions and know where you guys are going, so that we get on the set. I can help facilitate whatever your needs are. I think it's just a matter of within the department, and I welcome everybody to join in, because producers, production coordinators, people that, I do feel like our areas of expertise cross over. This is valuable information for everybody. The art department, it was a lot about what to do about returns. No, I mean, we all have our challenges coming up. And it was just very department specific as to, people have already started thinking, how are we going to do this? How are the normal things that we used to do are not going to be normal any longer. And what are those solutions? I hope that producers come onto these calls too, because we can give them information. Look, our checkout procedures are different. I need more time. And a lot of pre-production, we're going to have a lot more pre-production, so that they get information from each department, especially if they have to put things in their budgets.
That is something that producers should be aware of, and hopefully, the process is a little slower at the rental house. I mean, this is a good thing, but I've had one shoot since this started just a few weeks ago. I was at DC Camera, and I've been there a lot, so generally I just sort of roam around the place doing my thing, and which speeds things up. And now I do not. I tell people what I need and I let them get it and they hand it to me, and, you know, we follow protocol, but it slows things down. And the one shoot I did also had a purposely small crew to keep things safe. But, you know, again, when you start cutting crew members, you know, that's been a lot of not the white paper stuff, but a lot of, you see that presentations put out there from producers like, oh, we're just going to be smaller, leaner, meaner. And it's like, a lot of that time means not as fast. Like, yes, crews get bloated, but crews to a certain degree have like an optimal size. And, you know, I know Damon's on here. Hi, Damon. Like, we didn't get I didn't have a second, and we were shooting primes, and it wasn't that big a deal. But on the other hand, you could tell that all the producers, that it was actually a pretty cool shoot, because again, all the above the liners, the client, the agency, everybody was far away live streaming it, and Damon handled that. So, but Damon was in no position to give me a hand, as he might sometimes when he's DITing, and I didn't have a second. And all those people are just sort of like, hey, what's taking so long? And the answer is, less crew than ever, man, and we're being safer. So yes, it would be great for them all to sort of be an awareness that safer can be slower.
With the camera department, it's not the only department that's going to be slower. Every single department's going to be slower.
Oh, sure.
So the producers need to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Damon and I had a pretty long conversation on Friday about some of this, and a lot of the challenges that that I think that we're going to be going forward. You know, what we're dealing with is mostly in pre-production. You know, a lot of the things that we're going to need to do are going to need to be done ahead of time. We're going to need to be better about scouts. We're going to have to really, you know, understand limitations going on. Sorry, let me just send a link to Steve Sada. And I think that that's just going to have to be part of the process. It kind of was part of the process and it started to erode. We're going to have to try to bring that back and really try to focus on just making sure that we know what we're doing going into it, because you can't stand around and figure stuff out like you used to. You can't, you know, have a conversation. You know, I just did one shoot and it was just a director, another DP, because it was an agency shoot out of New York, and myself, and that was it. That was the three of us. And we had local real people that we were shooting with in a facility, but we had 3 pre-production meetings for a one-day shoot just because that's what we needed to do. And they sent us photos and they sent us as much information as we possibly could, just to make sure of that. And of course, the reality is it's not always going to be that way. We're going to have to work to the best of our ability within all these different parts. And I think that we have to understand all the limitations and the science and the safety requirements that are out there, but at the same time, realize that there's always going to be limitations. We're not always going to have an on-set person dedicated just to safety, as much as we would like to have. We're not all going to be on 30-day shoots. Commercials are, you know, by nature are a little bit more wild and woolly. We've got a lot of doc stuff that comes in and out. So, you know, I mean, I think the focus from what I feel is important is a lot of the soft skills that go into creating a team and supporting that coordination and communication up and down the chain that's going to allow for us to be more effective and be as safe as possible, without necessarily limiting sort of what we have to do creatively. You know, I think that we're going to have to take more breaks because people will get tired and make bad decisions. You know, we're going to have to step away and eat. You know, we're going to have to walk outside. We're going to have to do certain things if we are inside. So I think that, you know, overall, we're presented with a lot of different things, but a lot of it still goes down to a lot of the basic logistics that we've always dealt with within either our department or as a production as a whole, that, you know, come down to the fact that we're all fairly smart and we figure things out for a living. And we're good at, you know, taking information and regurgitating it or repurposing it into something that and change the way it works. So, I mean, to me, you know, we can focus on the technology and we can focus on rigid systems, or we can focus on how to really embrace both sort of the lifestyle choices and some of the commitments to each other, because I sort of feel like there is a big commitment we all have to each other that we're sort of need to focus more on that family connection, even more.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, I think that you guys should I'm not telling you what to do, but talk on the technical side. If this coming together as a community here, please watch our video or webinar from last week, which is on DC Camera's YouTube channel, and we address all that. That was the first webinar, coming together to work together in this pandemic.
Hey, Damon, are you able to pop on and talk a little bit about your experience with both the project that you did last week or the week before, and also just sort of, you know, onset monitoring, because I feel like that's something that Caprice wanted to talk about. I think there's the technology is already there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess I'll start just kind of by briefly summarizing what the workflow was on the shoot that Ian and I did, where, you know, we had more or less a full crew, but, you know, there were only, I don't know, what, maybe 8 or 9 of us actually on location, and probably another 10 crew members who were working from home on top of the agency and the client. And so that particular shoot was actually a pretty high-end system provided from a company out of LA, but you certainly don't have to go with, you know, such a high-end solution in order to achieve something like this, where we had the first AD, the DP, it was a multi-city shoot, so the key first AC, who was kind of in charge of managing and coordinating between all the different camera departments in each city. We had, you know, the costumes and makeup keys were also remote, and it was pretty smooth. We had a pretty good communication system for all of the remote people to talk to the set and for the set to communicate back to them. So, you know, just because we have to reduce the number of crew on set certainly does not mean we have to reduce the production quality significantly. It doesn't mean that we have to eliminate people's creative input from the production. It just means that we have to think a little differently about how we go about doing that. I'm actually, the last couple days, I've been putting together a completely remote DIT solution, which is shipping out tomorrow for a shoot in Iceland, which I'm going to be doing from home. So, you know, there's a lot of technological possibilities that we have here, which we really didn't have access to, you know, even 5 years ago. And I think we're probably going to end up borrowing a lot from the live TV, especially sports broadcast world. They've been doing remote production and having, you know, engineering teams and stuff controlling cameras that are at stadiums from back at their home office, you know, for years now. And they have lots of crazy communication solutions, which are pretty dead simple for the end user, which can connect, you know, a whole stadium full of crew with a studio that's 1,000 miles away seamlessly. So, you know, I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff coming to us and kind of helping us to work more or less the way that we're used to working, just a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, and you know, a little bit more deliberately.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you had said when we were talking about is that, you know, you can keep a lot of people actually in the production, you know, virtually, and that value is still there. There's still value in maintaining that crew and that awareness virtually as well. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And the more people that we can include, you know, even if someone's only able to give 40 or 70% of their usual creative input to a production, you know, they're still adding a lot of value to that production. And the more people that we can include, you know, the less we're going to have educational conversations with producers later about, you know, this misguided impression that they've gotten that we don't need that person because we didn't have them, because let's face it, a lot of producers are not particularly creative visual people, so they, even if there's to us a striking loss in production quality, a producer might not notice it. So if someone's always been in the budget and always been doing their job, just doing it a little bit differently, when it's safe for them to come back onto set, you know, that's one less conversation we have to try and get them back.
Yeah, and I think that that's also, you know, leads into the conversation about how to get as many people back to work as safely as possible. You know, I think that's a big concern overall, because I think we all work, we all have to pay our bills, we have to do a lot of other things, but we also don't want to die or kill family members in the process either. So, I mean, I don't know, does anybody have any concerns or thoughts overall at this point? Everyone's very quiet. It's not normal.
Well, I have just sort of a general thought, very general, about the way to approach this is, and my perspective on safety has obviously changed in the incredibly old man long time I've been doing this stuff, but this is just another element of safety. And just like before, if you thought something wasn't safe, I say don't do it. And, you know, no shot, no nothing is worth your life. And that's still true. And, you know, no shoot, if you're on a set and you don't feel it's safe, speak up or walk off. And I think everybody here would be like, oh, you did that for that reason? Well, we've all got your back. And whether it was because there weren't any police locking up the street or because some crew weren't being compliant with their masks, you know, let's look at it the same way. And on that same note, always watch out for yourself and everybody else on set. Booyah. Bye.
If I could, to back up Ian's thought there, as a business agent and as the local representative of the IA, I'm going to back that every single time. You know, safety is paramount. And if you don't, it's the one thing that's already built into all our contracts. If you don't feel safe, you don't have to do it, and there can't be repercussions. But just everybody should know, as a business agent and as the person on the ground, if I have to show up or do whatever, I will always back anyone who, you know, refuses to do any work because they don't feel safe.
And just so you know, I say that as someone with tons of bills. So.
Yeah.
Tons. I owe Nate money.
Is it scooter related? Is that why?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Soon. Eris, you want to talk about what we were talking about this morning, just with your experience last week with everything?
Yeah, I have not been working much like a lot of us here, I think, but I've done a couple of smaller shoots. One was a political that was a little bigger, but then I did a smaller one on a documentary last week. It was me and a sound man, and that was the crew. And we had an interviewee, and this project was remotely controlled from a producer in Los Angeles. And most of the day was in this person's house, filming her, doing different things. And then via the schedule, we were supposed to travel around to different places in Baltimore and show her, you know, talking about being in the city. And so it got to that point in the day, and I was like, okay, interviewee person, you know, we'll meet you down at so-and-so location. She says, well, I don't have a car. I was like, oh, okay. You know, so, I mean, in you know, forever in this industry, everybody just piles in the car, and, you know, that's just the efficient way to do it. And you don't have to park 3 cars or 4 cars or whatever. You just pile in the car and you go to these different places and you do it quickly and easily and efficiently. And so it was like, whoa, wait, you know, we're not going to do that. So I pick up the phone and I call the producer in California. I said, well, you know, I know this is the plan, but, you know, this isn't safe and we're not going to all pile into my car. And he says, oh yeah, well, I didn't think about that. I was like, okay, well, now you have to think about it. So, you know, throw the flag, put on the brakes, And he was totally fine with, even though it was a very low budget thing, didn't have any money left. He's, you know, in Ubering her around to these different locations, and that's what we did. And you know, it cost him an extra whatever, you know, $150 after the end of the day, but he just hadn't thought about it at all. And I think that that will happen. These things will happen, and it's up to each of us individually to see these things coming. You see it happen, you know, you throw the flag, you put on the brakes, you say something. It wouldn't have been, you know, too hard to like, cause okay, you know, pile in and you know, wait a second. At some point, somebody would have gone, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, but it's just pretty early. This is my second shoot in 3 months, and you know, we've been worried about safety, being in her house for most of the day and washing our hands and keeping distant and everything else. So it was on everybody's mind, and wasn't hard to throw the flag and throw a pause into the day. So anybody else have any shoot experiences where you got close to the line?
Yeah, I actually was at the White House, right outside the White House, in the middle of the protest on a documentary. I think some of the hardest things that I struggle with is honestly ensuring that everybody's wearing a mask properly, because it honestly, you know, our job already is very physically demanding already when you have to shoulder a camera or you know, have a wireless system that you're pulling focus on, or even just, you know, carrying a pair of sticks from one part of the room to the next. I was already having trouble breathing, but my struggle was with producers and talent not wearing masks properly. And even though we were outside, there was actually a point where producer goes, and actually director goes and takes down the mask of talent down so that they can get a shot of them in the middle of the protest. And I stopped. I threw it out of focus, and I said, "We're not doing that. Please give her the mask back on." And this was also an underage teenager that we were following in the protest, and it's not okay. You know, like I said, I think that it's important to take a stand whenever we have the ability to do so, and as much as we all need the money, and we've been struggling for, you know, however long, I'd rather be broke than dead, or any of my loved ones be affected by any of this, or any of you for that matter. But I think that the true testament is coming into those small shoots where we're already getting shorthanded on staff, on gear, trying to do multiple things at the same time while also being able to be safe. And I think that people are running very thin on patience on that kind of thing with all the things that are happening in this world. What I did have success was with, at least from a rental perspective of, you know, I ensure when I was talking to Sirius, what were they doing to sanitize and do all that stuff, and I found it really well that they were implementing a 72-hour quarantine on gear that was coming back to ensure that things were being properly disinfected and fogged, and they were giving it its proper time to not affect anybody, and everybody was wearing masks at the site. So hopefully, you know, something similar, I guess, is happening at DC Camera. That'd be really good to know.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing over here. We're not always able to do the 72 hour, you know, quarantine, but we have something similar to foggers. We've got a mister that we use on a lot of the cases, C-stands, you know, cables, most of the equipment. For the rest, we'll use isopropyl alcohol for preps, and we've got stations for gloves, masks if people need them, didn't bring them, hand sanitizer. You know, we encourage all our staff to consistently wash their hands between dealing with returns, things going out, and if they have to address something with a prep, taking care of that before and after. So we're doing our best to make sure everything's staying disinfected over here. Everyone's staying safe.
I haven't had a job yet, but I hope to. I'm glad to see that people are trying to make lists of what needs to be done. It still feels a little bit like the Wild West, because every week I almost don't want to read the lists, because some of the lists are going to be obsolete in a week as they change the rules. But some of you know I've been trying to work on making my own UV sanitizing thing, which just, it's not going to help while we're on set, but it can help before and after. And I just feel like if nobody, I don't know that I can, unless it's a union job, I don't know that I can trust anybody to be watching out. So to the extent I can do stuff myself to make it safer, I'm going to try and do that.
It's an interesting thing that I found, because we've been doing at my work, we've been doing a lot of interviews with these viral scientists, like viral experts, and literally every single one of them, and it's been basically like I go and drop a camera package off at their house and they take it inside and set it up themselves because they don't want people in there. But I've also had a couple who are like, I don't care if you come on in, set it up for me, so it's like, and those guys are like we're literally interviewing them to tell us that the virus is terrifying, and they're saying, right. But so it's like it's all over the map. Everybody's even with the scientists, guys.
Yeah, with a shoot I had recently, it was all virtual. Didn't get to scout beforehand. We go in, and the first thing I do is the guy lets us in. He's not wearing a mask. His kids aren't wearing a mask. The kids and the wife leave, and he's a doctor who actually is a general practitioner and is talking about how the company that he's working for is going to be coming up with new processes about COVID safety and all these other things. And he's just like, you guys want any water? You want any coffee? Please feel free to use the bathroom. He actually ate lunch in front of us. It was very strange. And I mean, it was kind of a mystery to me. And I'm like, I guess, based on what I know and what I'm comfortable with, all the windows were open and we only closed them once we rolled. I thought it was sort of on the borderline, but I'm also like, what does this guy know? I mean, and again, you could talk to they interviewed 50 different epidemiologists, and every single one had a different score for every single activity that you would rate. I mean, they're all scientists, they're all study the same pieces of information, but their risk tolerances are different, and that's going to be different across the board for everybody. The doctor thing really threw me, because he was basically saying after the fact that he had also been doing a lot of phone videos for his company talking about how not to get COVID, but in his own house, he didn't seem to be that worried about catching it or giving it to us.
Think how long doctors smoked.
That's the key word right there that you just said, risk tolerance, and everyone has a different tolerance level on risk, in my opinion.
Well, and that's somewhat a different situation than, say, a big episodic commercial shoot, where a bunch of people who nobody knows where they've been, who they've been talking to, if they spent the night or the weekend, at some outdoor bar in Dewey Beach, being far too close and abusing substances and behaving irrationally, and then come to work. How many times have each one of us come home with a killer cold or the flu because someone decided they could come to work without, letting people know, oh, I've been sick. I think it's going to go back. Erish and I, we used to do all those days together for GBH back in the day, where it was just you and me. And I think a lot of the doc production is going to go back to that. Just two-man crew. Remember the good old days of the 80s there, Erish?
I sort of remember. That was a long time ago. But you're right. I mean, particularly on the smaller crews, and Peter and I were talking about this earlier. not all of us do small crew stuff here, but Peter and I were talking about, you choose the people that you're going to spend this time with on these jobs, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And you think about, what sort of lifestyles they lead. If you don't know what kind of lifestyles they lead, they go to Dewey Beach on the weekend or whatever, then you'll think twice about bringing them onto your crew. If you feel like this person and you're comfortable with, how they live their lifestyle, then you feel more confident that they're living their life in a safe way for themselves and for the people around them. And you get a read on that when you spend a long time, with people. And those are the kind of choices that ideally we can make when we're in small crew situations. If you don't know the people at all, you might want to think twice about taking that job. And I know that's tough these days when jobs are few and far between.
And again, I'll just briefly say this. I encourage everyone, if you did not tune into last week's webinar, because it was about committing to each other as a community, having a pledge system that, I'm going to stay safe for myself, my family, and you guys. So I encourage, that's on DC Camera's YouTube channel. I encourage you, because that was the conversation last week.
Yeah, agree. I mean, some of these people here today weren't there, and that's a good reminder to go back and look at that one. Yeah.
But again, I mean, I think, just the simplest of precautions. I mean, working shorter days, because people make mistakes when they work a long day. You become less tolerant of having the mask on, or get tired and forget to wash your hands, whatever it might be. But that just seems like those sorts of things would be very helpful. Shorter work days, stressing the mask, all that sort of stuff. And also, people should, I think, make themselves aware of the risks of what you're using to clean your gear. Isopropyl alcohol, for example, is a very dangerous chemical. It's toxic. It presents a super fire risk, and you need to know how, if it does catch fire, you need to know how to put it out. You can't just throw water on it, and it can be problematic. There's a lot of other stuff like chlorine bleach. I found out today, you can't use chlorine bleach to clean stainless or to disinfect stainless steel in the earlier session. And I guess it's because it causes a supercaustic reaction to it. There's so much of that stuff that we're going to have to each become accountable for as time rolls along. And also just speaking up, when something's unsafe, say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about that also, Jim, is that it takes apparently 12 minutes for bleach to actually break down whatever's on a viral load on a surface. So that's just more information, the more aware we are of what actually is helping and not helping, so that we are aware of what the risks are is important. And Tyler is asking, how do you take precautions on set to make sure everyone aware of the risk on set, provide proper procedures, and prevent someone from walking off set and stopping production? The first part of that question, safety meetings are often a thing. I think safety meetings have to really kind of make a comeback, and they're going to have to be part of pre-production as well. And I think we have the unique opportunity here that we know most of the people that are coming on set. I have the opportunity a lot of times to kind of pick and choose who's coming with me on a job, or if I'm going on a job, I often am asked on because someone knows me or I'm recommended. So we can protect each other a little bit just because we all know how to be safe and we are aware of these different things. And then I'm not sure I understand the other part of your question about keeping people from walking off production and signing a waiver. Typically, at least for the union things, you can't sign a waiver because there's already a contract for that.
I think I can probably clarify that.
Okay.
I think early on in the discussion, people were saying, oh, there's something, that's being done that's out of my comfort zone, or it's too risky for me. So I'm just going to stop, production there. So if one person is stopping, then everything kind of comes to a screeching halt. So I'd like to be able to discuss those things beforehand, so that, you can't discuss everything, but you kind of know what's going to be done, and all the procedures are in place so that, you know, you're not going to have issues arise on set. You address those issues ahead of time. So if you know somebody is, you know, risk averse, you know, that you can, you know, address those issues and their concerns on the day before instead of on the day of set.
Well, let me just say one thing, that the, you know, safety meeting, even for a small job, even with, I mean, you know, if it's just 2 people, it's really easy to have a safety meeting. That's the door. That's how we get out. If I'm tired, I need to stop and I'll speak up. Stuff like that. But if it's a bigger crew, it should happen every time you change location, mostly because you need to have to know how to get out of a place that you've not been before. So that's the basics. As to signing waivers and stuff like that, you know, it's the employers, and if you're told a time and place to go, make no bones about it, you're an employee. In spite of all of the independent contractor agreements you sign, it's up to the employer to provide you with a safe, secure workplace all day long. So it's, you know, and the people standing behind the idea, oh, you're an independent contractor, it doesn't make any difference, you know, do this or you don't get paid. Well, they're your employer. You can't, if you can't say to whoever hired you, Tuesday's not good for me, how about next Monday? Then you're an employee.
That's right.
Basically.
So I've gotten calls about jobs, and the first thing I would just suggest to all of you, which I have done, my first question is, what's your COVID plan? What are your policies and procedures? If they go, huh? I'm like, click. If they're on this, and this is why I'm doing these webinars, to get everybody, including the clients, involved in these conversations, they should say, this is our policies and procedures. Do you want a copy? They should be sending a copy to everybody in advance so that they know. And these policies and procedures should be implemented on set, period. We can have Zoom calls the night before to have our safety meetings in advance, address questions in advance before, so we're not in those situations when we're on set. You know, a couple of the people that I work for, they've already put in their client contracts, you will wear a mask. I will shut down my own production if you guys aren't following the procedures and protocols. Some of the other questions, if you weren't on today's webinar, it was all about COVID. We had a risk management guy from Los Angeles on the call, a lot of great useful information. And we had a disinfection expert on that she can answer. We talked about dwell times. And then a serious grip and DC camera, the PERC document. If you haven't seen that, it's all about disinfecting grip and electric and camera gear. And so, and I think Eric put that on the DC camera Facebook page for everybody.
Capri, sum up the and I'll mess up the name of it, the acid that what's her name was talking about today.
Oh, the hydrochloric acid. Mm-hmm.
Hydrochloric, there you go. I would have said hydrochloric and everyone would go, what?
Again, anybody that wants to review that webinar will be on DC Camera's YouTube page. So please review it and take what you need from it.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting because they have a machine that looks basically like an electric kettle, and you can make this electrolyzed water or whatever the word was that she used. It had electrolyte in it. And it's more effective and less dangerous than a lot of other options out there. And then you put it in a fogger, and then you can fog, and apparently fogging is, if it's an atomized fogger, so all these new words I learned today, or not phrases, I guess, things that exist, can, sit in the air for 10 minutes, and then it will coat everything, and it will give it a much better disinfection than even UV light, because it can kind of go everywhere.
Well, I've been studying disinfection for about 2 months now, and I don't want this conversation to keep going about disinfection, because you guys have a lot more going on. Review that thing. I have a toolkit now. I have UVC light. I have foggers. I need to be prepared to be able to disinfect gear as it's coming on for. Again, if something's getting delivered and it needs to get disinfected right away, I'll have something. And everything there's great tools for different things, but we have so much weird gear like C-stands. I mean, is someone really going to sit there and wipe it with a Clorox wipe? You know, the foggers are good for certain things. You have electronics, obviously not. So again, you know, review today's webinar. We touch a lot upon that. We are also, the last webinar is going to be about checkout procedures with our vendors. So we'll get a lot more information then. But I'd like to bring up to the group, because, you know, with trying to wrap my head around all of our new needs are the witness cameras, all these monitors, because, you know, makeup and hair are not going to be on set to check it. You know, the photographs that I put on DC camera was just to start getting people thinking about having these stands for these little monitors and all the monitoring system. And then also too, with all of this virtual video village, like broadband with, how is that going to be brought onto locations? Because I need to know that. Obviously, if we're in a stage space or someplace where we do have a strong internet access, you know, supporting all this new gear that's going to be coming on the set. That's what I'd like to know from you guys.
All right. Well, Damon can speak about that a little bit, because we had a pretty long conversation about it. But there are a lot. I mean, the reality is that broadcast has been doing this for 30 years. I mean, they've been sending it video over really weird RF and other things for a really long time. So the technology is there. There's lots of boxes out that do it. The Teradek Serve Pro, the Cube. There are iPhones. You can, you know, scale it through Zoom. You know, the reality is that not everything is, you know, going to be designed for a big set, and not everything's going to be, you know, designed for a crew of 2 people outside, you know, and there's going to be limitations for all of that. You know, knowing about it, it's just like everything else. I mean, I think, Damon, how much was the rental for that huge box that they shipped and had sitting in DC camera for 2 weeks?
So the connectivity side of that box is $5,000 a day, including data. And as far as I'm concerned, that's highway robbery. It really, and actually me and a couple other DITs, one in Pittsburgh and one in New York, I guess 2 in New York, are actually in the mid stages of starting a set connectivity as a service business, essentially. And what we're kind of seeing is that really it should cost you, if you don't need mission critical 100% uptime, and, you know, if the stream goes down for 3 minutes, it's not the end of the shoot. We're really looking at, you know, producers probably having to spend $500 to $700 for connectivity hardware, and then plus their data usage, which for a single camera shoot is probably about $400 or $500 for the day. If there's no existing, you know, internet, if the location has reasonable Wi-Fi or an Ethernet connection, the amount of data that you would have to be buying for cellular connection is vastly reduced. Especially if you know, if you're like at a commercial location where they have like an actually, you know, where you can completely rely on their connection and not have to have any kind of backup, you know, then you're just talking a few $100s for the hardware rental. And then there's so many different ways that you can do that video streaming, like Peter was saying. It really depends on how big the crew is, what their exact requirements are. You know, are we going to be like at a stage where everybody needs to just be socially distant and watching on their own iPad, but they can be connecting to like Wi-Fi at the stage to do that? Or are we like on location where, like, you know, some people are hanging out in their car watching on their phone, and then if they need to come out, you know, and step in to the set to do something, you know, then people kind of shuffle around and make sure that we don't have too many bodies or whatever. You know, each one of those is probably has a different video delivery solution for the monitoring, which makes the most sense, but there are a lot of options out there, and just getting someone involved early on who has that experience, and they can ask the right questions of the producers and the different department heads and the locations coordinator and all that stuff, to come up with a solution that really works as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, and these producers are
Mhm.
gonna want to know how much does it cost. So they can
100%.
put it in their
And
well, so they can put it in their budgets. All these different things that they're going to need, you know, so that they can put them in their budgets.
Well, a good place to get connected to it a little bit is to watch out for Alex Lindsay, who's he did a bunch of streaming stuff out of the White House when Obama was president, and you know, he's a fancy pants in Novato, California IT guy. Has this series of daily shows called Office Hours, which you're free to join and look into, and they talk about streaming and at various scales. And the beginning of the day, it starts ungodly early for out there, which is like at 6 in the morning, California time. The first hour is basically people chatting, and then they cover a topic. And then all of the shows are archived on his YouTube channel. So I'll dig that up, link up for his YouTube channel and post it in the notes in the chat for folks if you're at all interested. But this is what he does. And he was here for a while. He was in the old, I think in the old NPR studios on M Street for a little while during the Obama years. So, and he has practical advice about scaling and, you know, what you need to be prepared for, and, you know, your first solution, your second solution, and when everything goes to hell, the third solution, you know, and how to plan for those. It's been very interesting to watch occasionally. It's a real nerd fest, but if you're into it, it can be very entertaining.
Yeah, send me
No
that
one
link,
like that here.
Jim, if you wouldn't mind. If you wouldn't mind, send me that link and I'll post it.
Hey, yeah, and that's actually one of the links I shot to you for his YouTube channel there a week ago. But I'll put it in the notes or in the chat and send it to you as well.
I mean, I think, Caprice, I mean, based on your question, I mean, just like everything else that we do, you know, adding 10, you know, wireless monitors to a location is going to have its incremental physical cost that you can figure out by going to DC camera or depending on the product. But you're also going to have to assume that there's going to be another person dedicated to that, because there's always going to be some problem somewhere. I mean, old story, I was in Alaska shooting in -40 with a crew, and we had a cam wave system, and all the clients were like in a van, and we were outside. So we were at -40 all day long, and they were in a, you know, 15-passenger van, and we had a little, you know, a monitor for them, and the cam wave was the only wireless system that was available that we could get at the time. And it kept losing signal because we're out on the ice, and they're like drilling into the ice and all sorts of stuff like that. And they kept complaining that it was losing signal or we were having problems with it. And so it kept stopping us. And so the crew's standing around in -40 while we've got to go deal with the clients from the agency sitting in a van complaining about the signal. And at some point, you know, at least for that story, at least everyone stopped paying attention. The client just stopped worrying about it and stopped asking questions. But I think that with any of these things, you know, when you're asking for more technology, you're asking for more bodies and more time, which is sort of antithetical, or, you know, not antithetical, but sort of opposite of what a lot of people are saying for smaller, you know, more streamlined crews. But there are scalable, very easy to use systems as long as the backbone is there. And that's the one variable that's always hard to deal with.
If I could pose a question here then, and this is above my pay grade to answer, so I'm just looking for opinions. Who's responsible for setting this up? Is it video assist? Is it DIT? Is it a mix? Does it depend on, you know, union, non-union? I don't know. What's everybody's thoughts on this? Because it's going to come up.
I guess it would depend on the scale of the production.
I can jump there a little bit, because this is something that we've been having a lot of discussions about in both the VTR groups and the DIT groups. And certainly I know Local 695 in LA County, who believes that their jurisdiction is far greater than just LA County, humorously posted some guidelines which are frankly almost impossible. But Local 52, VTR folks in New York, and the Local 600 people all over have been talking a lot, and what everyone is kind of agreed on is that the workflow really doesn't change that much. That we consider streaming to be like a really long cable, essentially. So if there's a, it's the camera department's responsibility to get video to VTR if there is going to be VTR. Now, if that VTR is working from home or on set, that's still the camera department's job. So whether that's going to be the DIT or a camera assistant, if it's a really simple, just plug this box in and it streams kind of thing. And then VTR handles getting it out to the clients and all that. And if it starts getting more complicated where we have lots of crew members working remotely, then it really becomes a collaborative hybrid solution, where VTR and DIT kind of get together and work on something that's going to distribute the workload evenly and the responsibility in a way that makes sense. And on some of these more complicated shoots, like the one that Ian and I did, I think we were shooting in 2 cities on that day. We had 5 DITs and 3 VTR people to handle all of the streaming and video delivery. So, that's like an example of a really big increase in crew. Now, obviously, they're not on set, but that's what it took in order to get, 15 or however many crew members plus another, I think I was told there were something like almost 80 people watching this stream, including the client and the agency and everything, spread out in like 6 different cities or something like that. So that's an example of, an extremely complicated workflow.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was a terrific answer.
All right, well, we're at an hour, just about. We started a little late, but does anybody have any other questions, thoughts, positive comments, whatever?
Actually, I do. I haven't been out on a shoot through all this pandemic stuff, but I'm wondering, well, obviously sound is my focus, and I'm wondering how that is being handled on location. I've heard of, going boom only. I've heard of some one-man band stuff. I've heard of, having wirelesses shipped to a client and then putting it on themselves. What are people seeing out there?
I can help talk about that a little bit. I've been out a couple of days, and it's kind of been a mixture of things. I did a commercial where the original thought was only boom and no wires. Obviously, I brought one with me just in case. And what had ended up happening was we had client remotely through a Teradek system. And, just like any other day, pre-COVID or whatever, shots changed and the shot changed and there was no way to get any boom close enough to do anything usable. So we had a discussion about it. I talked to the director and we talked to the talent from a distance and discussed it. And I pretty much asked the talent if they were comfortable with wiring themselves, and they said yes. So I had already had my transmitter, wire, accessories, everything like that in a Ziploc bag, pre-sanitized. And essentially I handed the bag over to the talent and I just walked them through miking themselves. And the costume for that commercial was fairly simple, so it worked out really well and everything worked. Getting it back from them, they just put it back in the Ziploc bag and I put that away, and I had additional wires with me that I had pre-sanitized. So we only had 3 talent throughout the day. So I brought 3 transmitters with me and then just used it that way. So I didn't have to re-sanitize stuff, because obviously the more times you sanitize, whether it be rubber on the wires or the metal casings on the transmitters, the isopropyl alcohol still works, but if you don't do it properly, it still is corrosive and it still does break down the rubber. So I try to do it as limited as possible. But that shoot worked out really well. Another shoot was just boom, and you kind of just, you make it work, and you make sure that not just the director, but, client and everything that are under that, understand that this is what we have to do. And I still did my job where, if I couldn't get a mic there, I let them know. And a lot of the response I got from that was, okay, let's just change the shot. And they were very comfortable with that. Especially I did a couple days of dock work during election week in Baltimore City. That was a little crazy, but we couldn't put mics on everybody. We couldn't, the specific mayoral candidate we were following was hypersensitive to being mic'd up, so didn't want to have it. So we're following her around, and I brought my 22-foot pole and just chased her around the whole time, and it worked to an extent. But there are certain situations where, as long as you communicate like you would normally do, you can make a scene work. On that shoot specifically, I had the director request that I put a mic on somebody, and I asked why, and said that we just need it. And he seemed like he was kind of sick and tired of not getting exactly the right sound bites and whatnot. And I just let him know, I was like, I'm not going to do it just because you want a better sound bite. You need to give me a reason as to why it's going to happen and why I'm going to do this. And I need a safe space to do it. And the talent needs to be compliant with it. It's the same exact thing. Even before COVID, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a job, whether it be documentary or with a union show, where talent just refuses to wear a wire. And if they're not comfortable with it, I'm not doing it. Like, end of story. And in COVID time, that's exactly the same thing. If they're not comfortable, I'm not doing it. And if I'm not comfortable, I'm not doing it. And that also goes for, if a sound person is not comfortable wiring someone, a lot of times I feel like people would just say, oh, we'll let them wire themselves. Well, at the same time, you're still handing over your equipment to someone who doesn't know what they're doing. If you're not comfortable with that, then you're not comfortable. And that's just the way you should kind of go with it. Sound is a weird thing, I think, just because we do spend a lot of time with a lot of different departments. We hand off our equipment to code boxes. We're handing out Comtex to people. So a thing I've been doing with Comtex is I am sanitizing my Comtex, and I give that person, that client, I put a blank piece of tape on the Comtech, and I hand them a sanitized Sharpie, and I have them write their name on their Comtech. And then that's theirs for the show. And I don't give out headphones. They have to bring their own headphones. So I make sure that the client knows or the producer knows beforehand to bring their own headphones that work with that headphone jack. And if they don't have headphones, they're not listening. And a bigger thing with Comtex too is so many times people just drop them and put them someplace, or just leave them on a chair, or we move locations and they move them and they want somebody else to carry them. A big thing with that is when I hand a Comtech over, I let them know, this is your responsibility, this is your property. Keep it like it's your cell phone. Don't put it down. Don't expect somebody else is going to bring it with them to the next location. This needs to be on your hip the whole time, or else you're not going to be listening, because I'm not going to go pick up your piece of equipment that was your responsibility. And the same thing can go with anything else. So I don't know. It's you can go on and on with everything, because with sound, we're so close to so many people. I know we say hair, makeup, wardrobe, but I'm constantly in people's personal space, whether it be not on a show or in a doc world. So making sure that the talent is comfortable and safe, and you're comfortable and safe doing whatever you need to do is fine. That being said, personally, I think that the best way to move forward in the sound department world might be adding another person to a crew on a show, from a show standpoint, and just having more boom operators. So we don't have to wire people as much. And then if we do have to wire someone, we have a utility that is at base camp and stays at base camp and manages sanitizing and handing off transmitters and wires to everybody. I know it adds another person, but in reality, you're preventing more person-to-person contact if you don't have to put microphones on people. that goes into a whole other conversation about talking in pre-production about maybe painting boom poles out, like what we did on House of Cards, seeing if they can involve that in the budget. If we can talk to costume department about pre-wiring costumes and we can have microphones built into costumes. Or if, in reality, on doc stuff, if producers and directors are okay with just clipping on mics, having exterior mics and not having to worry about hiding mics. You know, kind of other options.
Yeah, I mean, I was, as you were talking, Steve, I was just thinking about how many times we've laved 6 or 7 different characters for a doc, and you know, you're sometimes 150 feet away, but the shot works because you have really nice, good sound. And I don't know how you get away from that from a creative production standpoint to cover that stuff. You're gonna have to really rethink that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing. And that's the other thing that needs to be understood on the client side too, is that these limitations, you know, come with unfortunate consequences with quality. And to me, it's quality and time. I mean, it already takes time to put a microphone on somebody. It's going to take 2x, 3 times as long if you're going to be educating them through miking themselves. When we mic people, it's not always perfect. So we have to make adjustments. Well, how are we going to make that adjustment? Am I going to walk up to them on set? No, I have to take them to a separate area, which I do a lot of other times, but then they have to walk through it themselves. And I can't see what the problem is or touch what the problem is because I can't be in their space. So it's a lot of things it's going to be with time. And understanding that, like you said, if I'm 150 feet away and we can't put a mic on somebody, you're not going to hear what they're saying. On the doc a couple days of the doc I did, we had that situation where he was shooting on a long lens and I was just able to communicate with the DP and he was across the street. I went to the side the talent was on and I literally just hugged the edge of the frame on that long lens and just followed the person around. It totally worked, but I'm not going to say that that's going to be the flow of communication between every show or every job between a sound person and a camera operator or whatever you need. But as long as you are comfortable with talking that through and everyone's on the same understanding of what needs to happen for everyone to do their job, then it should be okay, and you should be able to make that work.
There, you know, back in the day when radio mics didn't work 150 or 200 feet away, and only worked, you know, as far as you could throw one, we worked around that. But then again, you know, films were made differently then, and now everyone has an expectation of, you know, kind of the reality television point of view about documentary filmmaking, which isn't always possible. And, you know, I think it's going to require a lot of reduction of expectations or reframing expectations as to what's possible to do responsibly. And in a lot of these circumstances, I think, you know, the right PPE, like, you know, a face shield, a mask, a double mask, gloves, a lab coat, or, you know, I mean, like a surgical gown, whatever. If you really need to wire someone and there's no way to get around it, disposable surgical gowns are not that expensive. And, you know, you just put a gown on and cover yourself up real good, and then wash the hell out of your hands when you're done. But it's more crap to carry around, and it's certainly not going to work well for, you know, on your average doc day. I mean, you know, things are going to we're reverting back to the good old days in some ways, and it's going to be a real change for people who grew up in an era when everything was possible. And, you know, one thing that's changing now is if more spectrum is eaten on set by there's only so much spectrum to go around. If more set's eaten by communications back and forth and video village concerns and things like that, that could affect how much you can have for sound. You know, how much spectrum is available for sound. We just completely lost everything above 600 megahertz in radio mics is now officially illegal to turn on anywhere in the U.S. You know, it was until July 1st, Steve, was the day?
Yeah, July 1st, we lost 3,000 channels.
Yeah, So, and that's a huge reflection. And I mean, I've been on industrial shows where there were, 86 or 90 wirelesses, and that's just not going to happen anymore. They're going to end up either having to swap transmitters around or having, several that are tuned to the same frequency, and just make sure that only one's on at a time, because that creates a whole kettle of fish. But all these problems are soluble so long as we all are polite and understand that it's not a contest, and that it's that you can't go back into the tropes of it's a silent movie, or it's without sound, it's just a comic strip, or without pictures, it's just a radio show. That doesn't work. Polite respect for all of our colleagues and working around the problems is going to be a lot more fun, and it'll get jobs done and put us back to work.
One thing I will mention too, when you mentioned frequency stuff, is I've spoken to a couple colleagues of mine that I worked with and spent a lot of time with out in LA in the studio world, and every studio has a frequency coordinator that works full-time on that stage or lot. And they're kind of getting into the conversation of how to add more channels to that spectrum. I know that we are trying to, we're able to work into higher level spectrum now. We've gotten permission to work in there. There's better technology coming out that we can use. You can stack frequencies on each other. But I know that something that people have been talking about, at least people I've spoken to out in LA, is that they're considering bringing in frequency coordinators for every show to coordinate between wireless video, additional streaming, additional wireless if needed for sound, additional monitoring, like that, just to kind of get the ball rolling, and then allocating frequencies and channels to each show. And you can't really deter from those channels. But just similar to the FCC licensing, you can reserve those channels. So that frequency coordinator can then reserve channels for you for your specific show that will work in your zone or area. That way you'll take the guesswork out of wondering if you have a dirty channel or a clean channel.
That's until the one-man band News Doggy comes up, and this happened on some big event I was on down at the mall, where I couldn't use any radios because of coordination concerns. I could have one Comtech frequency for the producer. We did everything else cabled, me to the camera and all that. And some news doggy came on and knocked some big fish right off the podium by interfering with what was going on because he didn't choose to follow the rules. That's going to happen more and more often. And whether or not there's a coordinator or not, I mean, even rock and roll shows now have to have, when we had them before March 13th, had frequency coordinators on them all the time, because when a new open act comes on, they got to coordinate all their in-ear monitors and so on, so that everybody can hear and talk and sing and play, because God only knows nothing is cabled on a concert except for the drum kit anymore. So
it's another thing I did on another job I did 3 or 4 weeks ago. The director for this commercial didn't want to, they wanted to try to keep as distant as possible, but the talent was going to be in a really small space. And he didn't want to have to keep going back and forth into the small space or bringing her out of this small space. So we ended up giving the talent an earwig, and then he used a push-to-talk microphone that I provided with him that he can give her direction through an earpiece. So he didn't have to go to her face-to-face. And it was private, and then he could hear her through the boom, through me, through his headset back where he was at. So that was able to help out a little bit, so he didn't have to go into her personal space and vice versa. Obviously, that's a little bit more difficult with a lot of people, but it's, I think another thing that's going to be more used, and it has been more used recently, is just voice of God stuff from people, bringing voice of God to ADs and directors so they can stay distant and still communicate. So yeah, I don't know. That ended up working out really well, and it was a cool option to have.
Well, I mean, I think Jonathan, that was a good question on your part, and I think, you know, based on everything else, there's a scalable, you know, there's a solution, and then there's also just, you know, what the production will bear and what risk tolerance there is as you go forward with all of this, and what the information we have, which could change or evolve as things go on. We've lost a couple people. Caprice, do you want to wrap up?
Sure. Thanks everybody for joining in. It's showing your commitment to yourselves and your community and our community. And we really need to band together at this time. So if you're kind of new to this, because we just started last week, again, I would just, you know, invite you to go to DC Camera's YouTube page to see last week's broadcast. If you didn't see this morning's, which was about the health safety supervisor role and disinfection, please go there. The departmental meetings and the webinars are going on DC Camera's YouTube channel. Spread the word. We all need to be together and figure this out. And next week we have our program's going to be How We Did It. So we have Steve Blair on, who just finished a job on Monday with Matt Pitroff out in Pittsburgh, and he's going to share, and that's the important word, share. We're all sharing here. He's going to share his experience as to what worked, what they did, what didn't work. I have another guest that's had a studio job in Philadelphia. And then the following week's going to be Meet the Producers. And I'm going to be asking people 4 questions, because we need to get some questions out to the producers and information out to them too. So please spread the word. We just want everybody to feel inclusive in this conversation.
Hey, Caprice, is there a chance that we could get somebody on that conference call to talk about paperwork and the new push to have everything digital and sent out ahead of time, so we're not, you know, having a textbook of paper that is handed from person to person. You know, I think this day and age is just, it's honestly, it's pathetic that we as technology people can't figure out a way to just have, especially for, you know, for unions, just have a number we give to somebody and just, that's it. They already have all our information, everything's set up and done. But at the very basic level, you know, just literally having DocuSign and just filling it all out and send it out. I think that's going to need to happen from now on.
I think as an industry, there's been conversation for years of doing this, and for some reason, it's just taking forever. I think there was on a webinar that I had to jump off with EP about everything going paperless. I did see an article, I put it on the Surviving the DMV Film Shutdown page about going paperless. I'll try to get somebody on there about that, but yeah, I know this is a big issue, especially with just, and then also too, we're gonna talk about with the health surveys, there are apps now that are out there, so we're not having to take these paper surveys for our wellness checks before getting on set. So there's one called the I Trust Pass. So people are developing these things, which is great. And you know what? With everything that's going on, we're an innovative, creative group. And I'm excited to see what these new things are going to come about.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Caprice and Peter. Good job, and all our participants to come and engage. It's excellent to see everybody come, show up, and engage and listen and have questions. And as Caprice says, all these webinars and meetings will be posted on our Facebook page, so you can tell your friends, people who didn't make it today, to go and have a look, because these are conversations that are important, and keep us all safe, keep everybody safe. So.
Great. And we'll see you next Wednesday.
Yeah, next Wednesday, and we'll post the links. Hopefully they will work this time. We will we'll make sure they do. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.